It's time for part 5 of our Scholomance Academy reviews. This time, we're looking at the rest of the Priest and Paladin cards, including the Priest Paladin dual class cards. Will buff Priest and Paladin have enough tools to work? Is Priest still better than rogues at stealing from their opponents? Let's find out. This should be interesting. We do review cards a bit differently here, so if you haven't seen earlier reviews, there's a card above linking to review number 2 where we explain the criteria if you'd like to watch the intro of that video first. There's a time code for quick reviews with puns in the description below for those of you without much time. For everyone else, let's get into the main reviews. To start us off, we get to see what priests are studying. Dragons. Draconic Studies is a 1-mana spell to discover a dragon with a benefit to reduce the cost of your next dragon by 1. Like the rest of the studies cards, this discount can be used in later turns, so Fate Weaver or Murazond can be played a turn earlier if the conditions are right. This spell doesn't fit the game plan of Res or Cube Priest well enough to get included, but Galakron Priest might consider running it. But honestly, I don't think it would be worth sacrificing another card slot in the deck, so Draconic Studies wouldn't be meta now. And unless a more dragon-oriented priest deck develops, it's not likely to find a home in the new meta either. The dragon pool at the moment is quite large, so we can't rely on discovering a specific dragon, but there are a number of dragon synergies in Priest that are not being used right now. Perhaps we might revive Dragon Priest? We could probably build an interesting dragon buff priest deck with help from this, and the discount could set us up for a really big combo turn when stacked with discounts from Fate Weaver. So we'll give it meme deck status as an enabler. Speaking of trying out buffs, this next spell has a real chance of pushing a number of archetypes forward. Power Word Feast is a 2-mana spell to give a minion +2/+2 and restore it to full health at the end of the turn. Many of the cards priests tend to use have high health, but are weak in attack. This is a buff card that works really well with that tendency, as not only will this allow priests to make an extra powerful value trade, but the high health minion will be in a better state than it was at the start of the turn. It will be sad to play this on a minion that can't attack yet, but a 2-mana 2/2 buff alone isn't terrible. It's no Hand of a Doll, but it'll still see play. This is a great activator for Sethic Veilweaver, and it nearly ensures Priest can take control of the board. This is amazing in Quest Res Priest for instant progress towards the quest, but that is currently a tier 4 deck. It's not as good as Apotheosis in many cases, but Galakron Priest may consider running it. Together with Raise Dead from last time, Quest Priest probably will climb back into the meta, and this will go into that deck. This is also great to keep a high health, buff-based minion alive and healthy for a potential buff and Inner Fire follow-up. Together with High Priest Amet, this might be enough for the archetype to re-emerge. Now, Power Word Feast is absolutely insane when cast on Batterhead. This looks interesting enough to try building a non-quest priest with Batterhead to take control of the board and then take down the opponent with Inner Fire on the following turn. We'll give it a try. Speaking of spells that provide some serious value for priests, this next card has a lot of potential. Initiation is a 6-mana spell to deal 4 damage to a minion, and if that kills it, a new copy will be summoned on the priest's side of the board. This initially reminded me of the failed card from Witchwood, Holy Water, that did the same thing, except that it added a copy to your hand rather than summoning it on the board. For 1 mana more, you get a copy of the minion to actually appear in play right away. While you don't get any battlecry value, the main drawback was the high cost without any immediate board presence. Even if this is just used to remove a 3/3, it's like paying 3 mana to remove a minion and 3 mana to play a new one, swinging the board in your favor with just 1 card. Oftentimes, this can be used to finish off a big threat, summoning a full health copy on your side of the board. The main challenge may be getting the minion you'd like a copy of down to 4 health or less, while having enough mana left to play this spell. Res Priest might consider using it to trigger and get more copies of Convincing Infiltrator into the res pool. While this is not as reliable as Time Rip, it is sometimes as good and sometimes better than Mind Flayer Karj. Even though it's twice the cost, this might just make the cut. The amount of diversity of removal alongside of the rest of the tools available to Priest at the moment makes me think that Highlander Priest could climb back into the meta, and this would be a candidate for that deck. It might just be good enough to see play in other meta decks as well. And we'll use this in an Infectious Sporeling deck to get extra copies of the Sporelings, either by destroying a copy from our opponent's side, or dropping Grave Runes on one sticking to our side and using Initiation on it. A good idea? Not at all, but we'll do it. There should be a number of other interesting ways to use this as well. In the last card, we saw a rather frightening lady performing Initiation on a Murloc. It seems she's the class legendary for Priests. Mind Render Elusia is a 2-mana 1/3 legendary minion with a peculiar battle cry. She swaps your hand and deck with your opponent until your next turn. She has more immediate disruption potential than King Togwaggle ever did. It's really difficult to see how this will work out until we can experiment with her. Since she's cheap enough to play and give you a chance to play out 1 or 2 cards from your opponent's hand, she has remarkable combo disruption potential. But your opponent gets to take a turn with your hand and deck with full mana, so they can play out any card they want from your hand, or perhaps use whatever gets drawn. The only deck I can see playing this really effectively would be an aggro or high tempo Priest deck that plays out all their cards and uses Elusia to grab one last bit of damage or pressure from their opponent's hand. Even then, there's no guarantees she'll work out well. I can't see any of the current meta Priest decks being willing to hand over their cards to their opponent for a turn, even if they could directly steal a card or 2 from their opponent. Not meta now. Maybe a Tempo Priest deck that can use this develops, but it just seems so unlikely to work out reliably that I doubt it would make the cut once the meta settles. Perhaps if a number of really strong combo decks develop, she might see play as a tech card? It seems doubtful though. As for memes, it will be a challenge to get crazy value from her, but we'll try building a deck with her and both the Youthful and Ancient Brewmasters to see how many times we can swap decks with our opponent. In Wild, it'll be possible to use discounts on Brand's Bronzebeard and Ancient Shade from League of Explorers after drawing through your deck really quickly to set up an OTK with Mindrender Elusia's help. But we can't do anything quite that crazy in Standard. However, we'll certainly experiment with her quite a bit. This next card will not gift your hand and deck to opponents, but it will provide a surprise extra minion on the board. Gift of Luminance is a 3-mana dual-class spell for Priests and Paladins to give a minion Divine Shield and then summon a 1/1 copy of it. This is ridiculous on Convincing Infiltrator, and almost any other Death Rattle minion. Sethic Veilweaver will be even more difficult to remove while getting extra value. Paladins will be able to get additional Librams of Wisdom as well as Murgurgles. It can also be used to get a Divine Shield copy of a big minion of the opponent's moments before killing it with Shadow Word Death. Cube Priest would absolutely love this, and Pure Paladin will be happy to get some extra Librams or Murgurgle value out of this. So yeah, this would be meta now. And with the amazing value that can be gained with this, especially from Death Rattle minions as a cheaper Psyche Split with Divine Shield for a very minor drawback, there will definitely be quite a few uses for this in the new meta as well. Now what about memes? I have just 5 words. Infectious Sporelings with Divine Shields. And there's a second one right away. This is awesome. It can copy other things as well, but Infectious Sporelings with Divine Shields. One extra payoff for casting Gift of Luminance on friendly minions is this next card. Devout Pupil is a 6-mana 4/5 taunt minion with Divine Shield for Priests and Paladins. He gets 1 mana cheaper for each spell you've cast on friendly characters during this game. So in a Libram Paladin, it won't take too long to get him down to a 0 mana 4/5 with Divine Shield and Taunt. A Cube or Buff Priest might be able to pull off a similar discount depending on the spells they generate from Sethic Veilweaver. Pure Paladin would be happy to include him, and Cube Priest almost certainly would welcome him as well. For the ease of getting this down to 4 mana or less, this is a great taunt to drop in almost any deck. It may be an auto-include in any new decks for Priest or Paladin. We'll build a Devout Pupil Wall with Grave Runes and Psyche Split on this in Priest once it goes to 0 mana. It'll also fit in our Libram of Hope Educated Elic deck as another Divine Shield taunt to buy time and overwhelm our opponents. Another reason to run a lot of spells in your deck that can be cast on your minions, or face, is the dual class legendary minion for Priests and Paladins. High Abyss Allura is a 4 mana 3/6 with a spellburst effect to cast a spell from your deck, which will target her if possible. The raunchy animation introduction for her was awesome. It showed a lot of the amazing things you can do with her in a deck with buffs and copy cards, as well as the dangers of running board clears with her. I'd recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it yet. Board clears and targeted minion removal are vital to the current meta builds of Priest decks, so Allura wouldn't join them. The only drawback to playing her in a pure Paladin would be casting a Libram of Justice or Consecration when it's not needed. If you used a Libram of Justice to activate the spellburst and she casts the other copy, there will be tears. However, the upside of getting a nearly free Libram of Hope, or buffs and card draw from Libram of Wisdom or Hand of Adal, might make running her worth the risk. And once decks can be built with her in mind, the upsides will certainly outweigh the downsides in a couple decks. She'll definitely join the future meta. Grave Runes and lots of buffs will work great in our Power Word Feast Batterhead deck with her. And we can include High Abyss Allura in our Libram of Hope Educated Elic meme deck, which will only run high cost spells. It will be sad if she dies before we can get the spellburst effect off, but sometimes we'll be able to play her on the same turn as a Libram of Hope and get the other Libram of Hope at the same time, swinging the board hard. Then our opponent will use AoE and they'll all die. But we can dream, and we can meme. There is another dual class spell for Priests and Paladins that will be a fine inclusion in a High Abyss Allura deck. Wave of Apathy. This 1 mana spell sets the attack of all enemy minions to 1 until your next turn. With Lazul's scheme, it's possible Cabal Acolyte might actually see some play once the set comes out. This is a great stall tool to buy a turn before using a board clear. It can help set up some amazing trades, or it may be enough to let your minions go face for a turn without fear of dying while setting up lethal for the following turn. It doesn't deal with a board by itself, and it's just a delay tool, but it is effective. While it would allow a Murloc Paladin to mostly ignore the board for a turn or take amazing trades, and it could stall for a turn before a massive board clear for most of the Priest decks, I don't see them sacrificing another card to fit this in. Perhaps a new aggro Paladin deck or Control Priest will find a home for this, but without amazing card draw in either class, it's a bit questionable whether either class would be willing to include this. It can set up some amazing trades, but it also feels a little too weak to make the cut. I could be wrong, and we'll find out soon, but I can't call this a meta later card. However, in a steal everything from your opponent Priest deck, this will fit nicely alongside Lazul's scheme to help Cabal Acolyte and Cabal Shadow Priest steal opponents' most exciting minions. This meme deck will earn the ire of opponents. This next minion for Paladins is one that will be able to get ridiculous value if all the opponent's minions have had their attack reduced to 1. Judicious Jr. is a 6 mana 4/9 with lifesteal. She's really tall, and if you're not dead when you play her, she may as well have taunt, because your opponent won't want you getting extra value out of her lifesteal. There's a dual class card with Warriors we'll cover next time that summons a minion from your deck and gives it taunt and divine shield, and this is an amazing card to pair with that. So I guess the main question is, can she survive and get value worth the cost of a 6 mana minion? She's certainly too slow for Murloc Paladin, and I can't see Pure Paladin running her as she lacks the immediate impact of a card like Amber Watcher, And all the cards which cost more have a ton more value bundled into them than just a few extra health and lifesteal. Judicious Jr. seems good, but she wouldn't make the cut in current meta decks. There are enough good cards available that Highlander Paladin might be able to make a comeback, and she'd be a nice inclusion in that deck. She also becomes quite a bit more looming with Librams of Wisdom tacked on, so there's a chance she earns a spot in the new meta. I'm hesitant to say that she can do it, but that 9 health and lifesteal looks too good not to find a spot in the upcoming meta. And even with the new dual class card with warriors I mentioned a moment ago, I'm pretty sure dual paladin will still be a meme deck, but Judicious Jr. is an excellent inclusion in that deck. Now, what would be an amazing buff to drop on a healthy lifesteal minion like Judicious Jr.? Why not use Blessing of Authority? This 5 mana spell gives a minion +8/+8, but makes it so they can't attack heroes this turn. This reminds me a little bit of Dino Size, the 8 mana spell to set a minion's attack and health to 10. However, this is much cheaper and stacks on the base stats of the minion being buffed. The drawback of not being able to go face this turn is a huge drawback, as it will be a must-kill minion for our opponent. But that just makes me want to pair this with Robes of Protection to make sure that after we buff the minion, no one can target it directly, improving the chances of our minion to survive and slap them in the face with an extra 8 damage. While an 8/8 buff to a Murloc would be hilarious and terrifying, I can't see Murloc Paladin slotting this in with a limitation about not going face. Pure Paladin could probably get away with it, but stacking +8/+8 onto a minion that managed to stick to the board will take up most of the turn for it not to be able to go face. On turn 8, dropping a Bronze Explorer and immediately buffing it with this does seem pretty appealing though. There are a few ways this could play out quite nicely, and there's still a little bit of mana left over to do something else. Even if we just hero power and drop this on the Silverhand Recruit on turn 7, that's pretty powerful. You know what? We'll go ahead and say this could make the cut at the moment. And based on the logic path we just walked down, I think there will be a meta deck or two that figures out how to use this effectively. Even if it's just a big target distraction that draws out removal from the opponent, with enough decent threats, they'll run out of removal. In a meme deck, we'll make High Abbess Allura draw even more attention by including this in our meme deck with her. And we'll try making this work on a really big threat alongside Robes of Protection. Or, if we really want to tempt fate against removal, we'll drop Blessing of Authority on a minion with Blessed Champion as our follow-up. Actually, our setup turn will be to drop a Libram of Hope for the 8/8 with Taunt and Divine Shield, and we'll buff that Guardian with Blessing of Authority. The following turn, we cast Blessed Champion on it, if it miraculously survives, to deal 32 damage in one hit. This is going to be fun. Now, if you thought the Pure Paladin cards sounded prideful, and the last card appeared to be flaunting its authority, wait till you see this next card. Argent Braggart is a 2-mana 1/1 with a battle cry to gain attack and health to match the highest in the battlefield. So for example, if you have a 4/9 minion and your opponent has a 9/5 minion, Argent Braggart will become a 9/9. This actually pairs exceptionally well with Blessing of Authority because you can buff something by +8/+8 for 5 mana and then drop this guy to get the same stats as the buffed minion for just 2 more mana. Maybe he does have a reason to brag. Murloc Paladin would kick this braggart to the curb, but Pure Paladin does run a few sizable minions. If the opponent's minions are bigger, Argent Braggart could come down first to get great value, and then you could play Libram of Justice to remove the opponent's minions as planned. Argent Braggart probably won't feel that great on curve, but he can certainly contest the board a bit in the early game as he'll still match the biggest stats on board. Since this has a pretty nice upside when compared with Shotbot, which sees play as a popular card, I think this could make the cut in Pure Paladin at the moment. As Argent Braggart does generally scale into a bigger minion over the course of the game, it will rarely feel bad to play him in any deck. And if a deck is built to capitalize on all the buff synergies in this set, he'll be an excellent inclusion there. he should see play in the upcoming meta as well. What's better than a 16/16 Ancient Guardian with Taunt and Divine Shield buffed by Blessing of Authority for 8 mana? How about a 16/16 Argent Braggart standing right next to him for just 2 mana more? They'll both die horribly to board clears, but it'll be a sight to see, and meme deck players will get to see it. So if 8 health feels like it's not enough for Argent Braggart, we might consider dropping him alongside this next minion for Paladins. Turalyon the Tenured is the 8 mana 3/12 legendary for Paladins. He has Rush, and an effect that sets the defender's attack and health to 3 whenever Turalyon attacks a minion. When first looking at Turalyon, I thought of Sunkeeper Tareem, the 6 mana 3/7 legendary with Taunt and a battle cry to set all other minions' attack and health to 3. That card was awesome, and saw tons of play. However, when looking at Turalyon, I can't help but feel bad for him. He's got tenure, so Scholomance Academy won't kick him out completely, but he fails in comparison to Tarim in every way. Turalyon costs 2 more mana, doesn't have Taunt, and only changes the stats of 1 minion at a time. There's no benefit to his allied minions, and he has to take damage to himself to have any immediate impact. If the minion you really want to rein in is behind a taunt, tough luck. Turalyon is great against a deck dropping single big minions turn after turn, so he partly counters Big Warrior and Big Druid, but against just about every other deck, he gets to cry in the corner. Murloc Paladin isn't even a question, and Pure Paladin might begrudgingly consider wasting 8 mana on him when they discover him from Lightforged Crusader. Otherwise, he would never see play in a current meta deck. It's possible a Control Paladin deck will come together in the new meta. If so, there's a sliver of hope for Turalyon in that deck, but it doesn't look good. I'm 99% certain he won't make the cut for the future meta decks either. While it will be a meme just to play him in a deck, we can try a few things to scrape together some interesting value out of him. Once we've managed to survive long enough to play him, we can drop him on the board and buff him with Librams to give him a better chance of survival after taking down 1 minion. The following turn, we drop a Gift of Luminance on him, followed by a Blessing of Authority on the copy. We do the same the following turn to the surviving Turalyon, and if our opponent has no board clear, we'll have half a board of decently useful Turalyons that might be able to close out the game. We might deserve tenure ourselves after jumping through all those hoops. Now we're done with the class cards for today, but let's look at 3 neutral minions that might have a chance to see play with Priests and Paladins real quick. First up is Enchanted Cauldron, a 3 mana 1/6 minion with Spell Burst to cast a random spell of the same cost. At 6 health for 3 mana, there's a decent chance this can stick on board for a turn, meaning you may not have to cast the spell immediately to get extra value from it. And if the opponent sinks 6 damage into it, it may feel worth it. If it hasn't taken much damage, Enchanted Cauldron can survive some of the lighter board clears, meaning you might get a sizable spell from it. As Paladins and Priests have some pretty nice buffs, there's a chance Enchanted Cauldron could find a home in a deck with one of these classes. Since it has 6 health, it could serve as a pretty nice base for buffs and Inner Fire in Priest. But my biggest concern is that the spell this will cast will be random. There's such a wide variety of possibilities at each spell cost that it won't be possible to get anything reliably. And no meta deck, other than mages with Reno and Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron, would be willing to take the risk of such a huge backfire to this plus a spell. Sadly, I don't think this will make the cut in the future meta decks either. On the low end, there are only 22 spells available for 0 mana in Standard, but the range in effects is crazy. But on the high end, there are only 7 spells for 10 mana. So I have no idea how we'll build the deck yet to avoid our opponent killing our Enchanted Cauldron after we drop it on 9. I think our best chance is paired with Frost Nova and Counterspell, played before dropping the Cauldron, but we will eventually build a deck with Pyroblast to pair with this and see if we steal a minion from our opponent, drop a bunch of charging Clefthoofs onto the board, drop a few elementals with taunt, summon 2 copies of the smallest minion in our deck onto the board, annihilate everything and kill ourselves with Puzzle Box, buff the couple minions we'll have by +4/+4, or just Pyroblast ourselves in the face. Why? For the memes. Another neutral minion with a decent health total for the cost is Ogremancer. It's a 5 mana 3/7 that will summon a 2/2 skeleton with taunt anytime our opponent casts a spell. This could be so much better than Hogger if you're facing a small spell mage, but any 2 damage or more AoE will negate the effect on this guy. Priests and Paladins have the healing and buffs necessary to keep this guy alive long enough to get decent value from him. So would Ogremancer see play in current meta decks? Since it relies on opponents playing spells to get extra value, and there isn't really a buff or inner fire deck in the meta at the moment, I don't think Ogremancer would have a chance right now. I think Ogremancer does have the greatest chance in Priest, due to the possibilities with buffs and inner fire, as well as the upside from these risen skeletons anytime our opponent casts a spell. If Small Spell Mage and a few other spell-heavy decks become really popular, which makes enough sense in an expansion with the Spellburst mechanic, Ogremancer might see play as a tech card. But while I really want this to be a great card and fill the board with taunted skeletons, I don't think it'll quite get there in the future meta either. So this does say you'll summon a 2/2 skeleton with taunt whenever your opponent casts a spell, and we can force our opponent to cast a spell with Unseen Saboteur. Is that a good idea? Probably not. But is it something we want to try out and see if it works, and then buff this guy with Blessing of Authority so we can absolutely shock our opponent? Yes. Yes, it is. Our last card for this review is Crimson Hothead, a 4 mana 3/6 neutral dragon with the Spellburst effect to gain +1 attack and taunt. The 4 mana 3/6 stat line isn't bad, and the ability to jump up to 1 extra attack and get taunt makes it decently appealing in any deck that cares about dragon synergies. I don't think it'll see play as a card that you're expressly trying to trigger the Spellburst right away, but it is a nice upside. Honestly, I think this would slot in pretty nicely as a replacement to just about any deck currently running Twilight Drake, as it has a reliable amount of health no matter the number of cards in hand, and it will pop up to 4 attack and gain taunt the moment you play a spell, making it potentially better in a number of cases. So Highlander Mage would be a pretty nice fit for this. As for the upcoming meta, I don't think Dragon Hunter or Dragon Druid will choose to use it unless they're really getting pressured hard in the early game. However, Highlander Mage might still run it, and there's a chance that Small Spell Mage picks it up as a stall tool as well. And with Crimson Hothead, I think we finally hit the critical mass of dragons necessary to pull off a quality Dragon Rider Talritha meme deck. It'll be especially nice when we pair the Talritha buff with Gift of Luminance to get even bigger dragons cycling onto the board. We'll also throw this dragon into a Dragon Priest to see what comes of it. And now for the quick reviews. Draconic Studies is not a required course for current and future meta decks, but Dragon buff priests will appreciate the discount. Power Word Feast would provide a feast for Sethek Veilweaver in the current meta, may power Quest Res Priests Climb back into the meta, and will be the final word from Batterhead in an Inner Fire meme deck. It's really questionable whether current meta decks would be willing to undergo initiation, but Highlander Priest would be happy to reinitiate itself into the meta, and Infectious Sporeling is eager to explore new memes with this. Mind Render Elucia will rend the minds of any deck builders trying to use her in current or future meta decks, but she'll initiate quite a few opponents to bizarre meme decks. Gift of Luminance will prove to be a gift to current and future meta decks, and it will light the way for Infectious Sporelings and other meme decks to take over the latter. Almost all current and future meta decks will be devoted to including Devout Pupil, and opponents' pupils will dilate when they see what we can do with him in meme decks. High Abbess Allura would probably get along with current Pure Paladins, but she'll definitely be a high priority inclusion in a new meta deck or two, and she's quite alluring for a number of meme decks as well. Wave of Apathy is too apathetic to include itself in any current or future meta decks, but it will breed a wave of hatred from opponents which lose all their minions to Super Thief Priest meme decks. Judicious Jr. jogs away from current meta decks, but she might get to jump into a future meta deck, and she'll joust a few minions in dual meme decks. While Blessing of Authority is a slow starter, Pure Paladins would be happy to flaunt their authority in the current and future metas, and our Libram of Hope Blessed Champion meme deck has a whole new blessing to try out. Argent Braggart apparently does have reason to brag, as both current and future meta decks would like him, and our 1616 Ancient Guardians will not stand alone in meme decks. Turalian the Tenured's tenure does not guarantee him inclusion in current or future meta decks, but by jumping through enough hoops, he can join meme decks. Enchanted Cauldron isn't a reliable mixing pot for current or future meta decks, but mages will probably pull off some awesome, convoluted 10 mana spell memes with this. Ogremancer wouldn't raise any skeletons in the current meta. Might have a chance in a meta where Spellburst is common, but his other head disagrees, and he will summon some very weird experiments with saboteurs. Crimson Hothead may only see play in the class shooting Fire Blasts in the current and future metas, but Dragon Rider Talritha and a few other meme decks are happy to chill with this Hothead. And that's a wrap. We've got more reviews coming, and there will be lots of experiments to share once the expansion hits, so drop a like if you enjoyed, and smash that subscribe button so that you'll know when the next video comes out. You're awesome. Thank you for watching, and have an awesome day. Hail to thee, O Scholomance, the magic